Did you ever read the book, The Little Prince? There's this amazing quote that I love from it. A goal without a plan is just a wish. And the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, I think he knew a few things about goals. He was a writer, a poet, a journalist, and even a pilot. So how in the world did he accomplish so much? How did this one person do so many things? Was he just exceptionally talented or smart or lucky? Well, maybe. Or maybe he knew the power of a well-executed plan. And I think that's where that quote comes from. A goal without a plan is just a wish. And while some of us may be more naturally talented in certain areas, we're all capable of accomplishing some pretty big things. But to accomplish almost anything, you usually need a plan. So what's a goal that needs a plan? Well, if you have a spiritual goal like spending more time with God regularly, that needs a plan. If you have a mental goal like learning something new, that needs a plan. If you have a physical goal of trying a new activity or getting healthier or stronger, that needs a plan. If you have a relational goal like being a better friend or being a kinder person to your family, that needs a plan. These are all amazing goals, but without a plan, for most of us, they end up just being wishful thinking. So take a moment to identify your most plan-worthy goals. We're looking at a book from the Old Testament called Nehemiah, and it tells the story of Nehemiah. And about 140 years before this book was written, the Judean people were conquered by an enemy army who destroyed their capital city of Jerusalem, burned their temple, and sent many of the people into exile. And when the book of Nehemiah begins, some of God's people are beginning to return to Jerusalem. And Nehemiah finds out that the city is still in shambles, and he gets this God-sized dream for his life, and he sets a God-sized goal that he wants to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And now Nehemiah had a goal, but what about a plan? Well, as we continue through the story, we see that the first thing he does is he prays and fasts about it. He spends months in prayer, preparing himself before he goes before the Persian king, King Artaxerxes, his boss. And here's just a small clip from his prayer. In Nehemiah chapter 1, this is what it says. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now, there's three things that we notice in this verse. First, Nehemiah didn't ask God for step-by-step instructions. He knew that God was leading him to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and for him at that moment, that was enough. Second, by the time we end the prayer, we see that Nehemiah is already beginning to develop a plan. He knows that for him to be successful, he's going to have to go before the king. And then the next thing we see is that Nehemiah was already taking note of the resources that God had given him. He was a cupbearer who had a job that was very important that gave him access to the king. To sum it all up, you could say that while Nehemiah was praying, he also planned. And my guess is that the more he prayed, the more clear his plan became. And when we get to Nehemiah chapter 2, the things really begin to move, and we see how this plan is beginning to unfold and how God is involved in Nehemiah's story. In Nehemiah chapter 2, starting in verse 1, this is what it says. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was served to him, I carried the wine and I gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in his presence before. So the king said to me, why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This can only be sadness of the heart. Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my ancestors' graves, lies in waste, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' graves, so that I may rebuild it. The king said to me, the queen also sitting beside him, how long will you be gone? And when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a date. Then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to the governors of the provinces beyond the river, that they may grant me passage until I arrive in Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, directing him to give me timber to make beams for the gates for the temple fortress and for the wall of the city, for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the gracious hand of my God was upon me. See, in these verses, we discover that Nehemiah hadn't just been praying casually and preparing casually. Instead, he was praying with purpose and intention, and he was carefully planning details all along the way. The king asked Nehemiah why he looked sad, and he had an answer prepared for him. The king asked what Nehemiah wanted, and he knew exactly what to request. The king wanted to know how long Nehemiah's journey would take, and he had a timeline prepared. And since the king seemed pretty open to the ideas, Nehemiah already had a list of requests prepared. Nehemiah continued to talk to God and pray, but he also got to work planning and moving. He hoped that he would get to speak to the king. When God arranged the perfect moment for him, Nehemiah was fully prepared to take advantage of it. Nehemiah prepared while he planned. And when we get later on in the chapter, we see that he had this plan in place, but he also had to recruit other people to make it happen. But the first thing he needed to do was to figure out how to deal with people who were going to be defiant, who wouldn't want to go along with this plan. And along the way, Nehemiah actually developed some enemies. We're named two enemies in the book of Nehemiah, Sanballat and Tobiah. And while you're working on your God-sized goal, you need to understand that sometimes you will develop enemies, people who will oppose you along the way. But Nehemiah was prepared for this. He wasn't naive. He expected people to oppose him. He knew how to hold his tongue and to speak with wisdom. He was wise about who he trusted and how he spoke to people. And he figured out ways to bypass the people who opposed him so that he could recruit the people who shared his vision for this God-sized goal. He surrounded himself with the right people. He even planned for opposition. Now, I'm not sure what you think about God right now. And I'm not sure if you've developed God-sized goals, but that's okay. But if you have a God-sized goal in your heart, I want you to understand that God has designed you with everything that you need to accomplish the God-sized goal that God has put in your heart. You have a unique blend of skills, experience, and knowledge. You have God-given interests and passions. You have friends and family, trusted adults, teachers, coaches, mentors. You have access to knowledge and expertise and books and videos and the internet, access to influential people who make things happen, money, supplies, an audience. You have a location, a platform, an opportunity. All the things you need are right there in front of you. And I think there's 4 real building blocks to developing a plan to achieve your God-sized goal. The first thing you need is you. At the end of the day, even though we often feel insecure, God has designed you with care and intention and purpose. And when God gives you a God-sized goal, you need to ask, what do I bring to the table? How can I contribute to what's going on here? The second building block is others. Just like Nehemiah discovered most God-sized goals can't be achieved alone, there's a lot you can do on your own, but there's some things that need other people. And if you expect to make a lasting change, you're going to have to get other people involved. The third thing is things, resources. Just like Nehemiah needed transportation and wood and letters and the king's blessing, you're probably going to need some resources to get things done. The fourth thing, and this is the most important, is God. Whatever your goal is, whether it's an everyday size goal or a God-sized goal, like a once-in-a-lifetime size goal, God is with you. And when you pursue things in a God-honoring way, God honors that. Like Nehemiah, God probably isn't going to give you a step-by-step plan for achieving your God-sized goals, but that's okay. You don't need one. What you need to know is that God is with you every step of the way. So what will you build?